Recording
Have
has
some
started.
Live captions as well, if you like.
Oh, go for it.
Yes, do it. Live captions. They struggle with my supposed accent. I think they think I'm Australian.
Dude, no one can understand me anyway, so like what the hell is a caption gonna do?
What did you just
But
say?
that's not because of your accent.
No, it's just because I talk shit, so like
Leonidas went straight in for what did you just say? Willkommen et bienvenue, wonderful people, to the April Power Platform Virtual Happy Hour. You're live on Channel 4. You're probably muted by Carlos, so please don't swear. We are just going to have a quick run through, as we do at the beginning of all of our recently, all of our recent happy hours, of the code of conduct, which seems almost laughable in looking back at the Mark Smith, Steve Mordew one, but anyway, nonetheless, we do have a code of conduct, and we strive always to be mindful, welcoming, and respectful of all others, regardless of their viewpoints or regardless of anything. So we do urge you all, particularly if we do open up to questions, if we unmute people for questions later, please do be understanding of people's viewpoints, be respectful, no crosstalk, please, and just treat everybody like a human, and we'll all get along. I think
that is unless you think SharePoint's a data source, then we will destroy you. There is a caveat to that.
I haven't even got off the code of conduct sheet. Come on.
Are you trying to start a war?
Good Lord. So this month we are warmly welcoming Andrew D. Welch and Whatling / Keith, who are here to talk us through Centre of Excellence, adoption framework, all of that good stuff. Well, not talk us through so much as have an open and probably quite spirited debate about Centre of Excellence and adoption framework. For those of you who don't know Andrew or Keith, do you guys want to give you a quick intro to?
No, it's much more fun to listen to you do it.
Is it? Even though you're mocking my hair colour, which is very rich coming from a ginger. So.
I didn't say that.
Oh, was it? I thought it was you. Sorry, I take it back.
If you were in Keith's house, you would literally blend into his wallpaper, I think.
I would, yeah. Well, I would do my best to do so. I don't quite have the monobrow of the cushion, but I can grow it in, so it's fine. So for those of you who don't know, Keith is well, both Andrew and Keith are pretty much community legends. They both happen now to work for the same company, which is still weird, but awesome all at the same time. Andrew's been a massive proponent of the adoption framework, which is something he will sell you at the drop of a hat, ideally. And Keith has always been an incredible supporter of the Centre of Excellence. Because it's very helpful, especially if you have a lot of governance around or you have a lot of apps that you're trying to manage and so on and so forth. So like to kick straight off, do you want to start with the adoption stuff or the Centre of Excellence stuff, neither of which are, I mean, they're inextricably linked, obviously, but which of those do you think is the one thing that if people were literally about to adopt a lot of stuff on Power Platform, which of those ones would you do first and why?
Adoption framework.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's sort of like the question, do you want to start off talking about like one of the handles inside of the car or the entire car?
Okay, I would like to talk about the handle inside the car.
Oh, well, in that case, we'll talk about Centre of Excellence.
Sorry, Lee. Sorry.
Yeah. So when we talk about Centre of Excellence, people instantly think about the starter kit, right? Could someone just give me a quick overview of the difference between the Microsoft starter kit and what we generally perceive to be Centre of Excellence?
I'll give you an overview of that. So
Manuela's on a meeting tonight, so you're all right. She won't be here.
Oh, that's all right. So the Centre of Excellence toolkit is a set of apps and flows and a schema, data schema, that pulls information from the Meta Power Platform connectors that connect to themselves, right? So like a a Power Apps connector that connects to all of your Power Apps and can tell you information about them. The same with your flows, the same with your environments and all that kind of stuff. And it's great. Works very well in most organizations. But by far more important, more complex, more difficult to set up, far more difficult to set up, is the Center of Excellence, the team. And the Center of Excellence, the team, it's quite funny that you've kind of wandered into the thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, because that was the kind of like the main thing for me, is that it seems that the most difficult bit of doing Power Platform adoption at scale in any organization is actually defining who is the Center of Excellence, what are their functions, what are their roles, who's going to take responsibility for X, Y, Z. All in all up, like that's probably one of the most difficult things, is actually kind of turning around and saying, well, there's probably some jobs here that are going to require some money spent. There's going to be some time distributed and allocated, and you're going to be responsible for doing this set of things with this part of the platform, and you're going to be responsible for doing this set of thing, and you're going to have to talk, and you're going to have meetings, and you're going to have a department, and you're going to have a leader and all that kind of stuff. And that takes a long time in any organization to set up, to try and kind of get a new thing going like that. But at the same time, you've got Power Platform knocking at the door over here. The organization is putting a huge amount of pressure on the IT department that we want it now, we want it now, we want it now. And when we get it, we're going to run at 1,000 miles an hour. And you've got the Center of Excellence guys over here going, okay, well, we're kind of learning about this, and we're taking on board what you're telling us and how we're setting this up, and we're reading through, but we're still kind of early days. And I think that's a little bit where the partner network comes in and all the rest of it. But I'll let Andrew go for what's your spiel on it, buddy?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think the big mistakes that people make, right, is they don't think about who owns this. And I ask people this all the time. Lee and I were on a call with an organization yesterday, right? And I must have asked 5 different times in 5 different ways over a 2-hour period, who owns Power Platform around here? And they could not come up with an answer for us at all. They just couldn't define it. And so one of the things Joe asked a question in the chat about like people treating COE type stuff as an afterthought. And I think that it's hard to have a conversation about this unless we get our words right. So there's really 3 things in play here. One is the Center of Excellence starter kit, which is, I always tell people, it's 1/22nd of everything you need to do when it comes to Power Platform adoption, management, governance, that type of thing, right? So the COE starter kit is a set of tools that does a thing, as Keith said. Then there is the Center of Excellence, which is sort of like your secret, you're not so secret, but your ninja cell of Power Platform expertise. Kind of like what EY thinks he is. When he, hey EY, can you go put on your costume? Like, just do it. Do it, please.
You don't be a performing monkey for Andrew D. Welch.
Okay, all right. So
he's gone. He's gone.
And he's gone. Someone set a timer.
Okay, I'm on it.
Okay, so the next is the Center of Excellence itself, which is that ninja cell that owns, drives, moves Power Platform forward within the organization. And then there is this much larger thing, which is Power Platform adoption, which is how do we... Well played. Which is Power Platform adoption is how we build that, how we build and mature the management of the platform, but also how we build solutions at scale, how we roadmap new workloads onto the platform. And it's really important to separate those 3 things, because a lot of times people are like, oh, if I install the Center of Excellence, that means I have COE, and that means I have enterprise management. And that's not true at all. How's that?
Can I, I would, so I just want to go back to your earlier point, which is, you go into a customer and you ask who owns Power Platform here, and they can't answer you, right? For those who may not know, why is that important that somebody owns Power Platform? Or what does the lack of ownership for it mean to them?
Yeah. So I mean, anytime you adopt a new technology, it's like, I don't have any kids, so people with real children, please don't be offended by me saying this. I know that they're a lot of work, or but it's like you're adopting a thing that needs your love and your care and your commitment and someone to help move it forward on the good days and the bad days. And if no one owns it, if no one is responsible for this, then there's no one there to take up for it and to sort of represent its interests in the context of a large organization. We would never say, hey, we're going to have Azure technology and literally no one's going to be responsible for it. And one of the things that I think that the citizen developer movement, for all of its benefits, has created in the minds of a lot of organizations is that this is easy. Any idiot can do it. Therefore, we're just going to stick it on autopilot and hope for the best. And, Keith had a terrible, terrible weekend because someone did that. You just can't. Someone has to own it. Someone has to represent it.
And does that person, Joe asked, does that person need to be a traditional IT type? I'm going to assume not, but I wouldn't assume anything. I guess.
I don't think they do necessarily. I think it's a combination of, in fact, quite often it's a combination of the two, of someone who fundamentally understands the business and its impact and can communicate backwards and forwards, and is also a really good project manager. You need someone to manage it. Do they have to have the technological skill set? No, they need to understand the impact of the business. They certainly need to have some, it would be good for them to do app in a day. It would be good for them to kind of understand the basics and maybe solve some of their leadership problems with Power Platform, right? That would be a good thing. But I think fundamentally it needs to be somebody who's just a really great manager and understands enough about technology, but also enough about the business and all of the facets and who to talk to, because a lot of running the COE is who to speak to in the business about lighting up a data source, about getting a GDPR thing through, about getting funding for licensing, all that kind of stuff. None of which is particularly technological. It's much more a facilitative role.
Yeah, I think that actually it takes a really special sort to be the owner, the product owner, the platform owner for Power Platform, right? I've seen, I've seen it be someone who is way too IT driven, who's way too technical, and it doesn't even occur to them the fact that we're trying to solve actual business problems here. We're not solving infrastructure problems so much as we're solving business problems. Then I've seen people take it from a business or a citizen developer perspective, and they just have no, a lot of them have no real grasp of how much technical infrastructure actually sits behind the platform that you have to look after. One of the big mistakes I've seen a lot of organizations make is giving it to their Microsoft 365 folks, right? Though people for whom that is their specialty, right? Exchange and keeping the lights on and keeping kind of core essential services functioning from a productivity perspective. That is a really important job for every organization, but they're just not in the mindset. They don't have any context for moving workloads to the platform left and right. That's important. So it's not just someone you can find any old person. You really have to find a special sort to make it successful.
Right. And so ultimately, it's probably someone that has the ability to communicate with all of the different factions involved inside of the business, right? That's probably the ideal person. Like, what about if you have where I struggle with this is, what if you're a smaller company, you're not one of these large organizations, is the Center of Excellence still relevant for you? Is the adoption framework still relevant for you? What would you, what are your thoughts on that?
It's almost more relevant, I think. I think for the super large, in terms of the toolkit works better for small and medium-sized businesses and for super large businesses. For super large businesses, some of the flows fall over and there's capacity issues and all that kind of stuff occasionally. But I think I think is very important. Like look at CAPS, the story from America, the custom air products user story. So it's 150 strong bespoke manufacturing company, manufacture HVAC aircon units, and they had someone who was spending a lot of time building access, and she went off and built a ton of power apps. And actually, even as a single lone app maker, governance is still important, right? Because what happens if you get run over by a bus, and what happens if the worst happens and someone has to take over for you? What happens when you leave the business? Now, I'll happily take that, because when I was on the buses before I joined the consulting world, it took me 2.5 months to hand over all the VBA that I'd written in it, and all the Excel documents lying around all over the place. Even though they were systemized, it was just a nightmare. But because all the Power Platform stuff had descriptions, it was reasonably good quality. There was, the comments in the code, the variables were named, consistent naming of variables and all that kind of stuff. I could hand them over in a week. So and it was like 50, 60 Power Apps. So. And
this is like being hit by a bus, obviously a far more realistic issue for you in your pre-consulting.
Yeah, of course.
As regards data, like this is, I don't know if Laura Graham Brown actually managed to get into the meeting or not. I hope so, but Laura and I have discussed this on many occasions, and in fact we did a session at Ignite on it. And a couple of Chris mentioned data in the chat, and how important is data to either of those processes. Now, realistically, I think data is the key to anything. It doesn't matter what you're doing, because like we've discussed, I know you and I have discussed this, Keith, that you can sit someone through like a Power App in a day or a Power BI in a day or something like that, and it's all well and good. But actually, when that person then tries to get a Power BI report using the data that's in their D365 CE, and they realize that several developers have been through there's no naming conventions, there's deprecated fields that have actually got data that you would still want to use in it, as well as a new field that's replaced that field, but it's called something different. And helping people to make sense of all of that stuff is just, you can't, it's absolutely nightmare. I know I've come up against it myself. It's completely nightmarish. So, is that, like, if you were to summarize it in a nutshell, is that what this is? It's a way of making everything standard on your platforms so that everybody knows where everything is, knows where to find it, or is it something? I mean, or is that's probably
it's one
just
of the
part
facets
of it,
for sure.
right?
It's one of the things it does for sure. I think that trying to apply some commonality to app development, to naming conventions, to the best way of doing stuff. Internal communities do a really good job of doing that, but what you then need is to overlay that with some decisions from a central place that says, we all come together and we agree this is the way of doing it, because this is the right way to go, right? I mean, you come to a consensus, and I think that's really important. But I think the other thing that the Centre of Excellence, especially the toolkits there to do, not just the people, but the toolkits there, is to go and gather mission intelligence on workloads, and this was actually one of the big things about joining AIS, and the best, I think, it's such a small thing, right? But it's such a small thing, but it's so powerful, is that not referring to Power Apps and Power Automates and Power BIs and Power Virtualizations, just calling them workloads, right? Because it's like, otherwise you talk about Power Apps all day and Power Automate, whatever your poison is, you talk about that all day. Anyway, that's a really good tip, like talk about workloads. And I think that when it comes to looking at the workloads, that when a business kind of comes to COE and they come to Power Platform and they're nervous about it, especially the very large organizations, the very, very large organizations, they're not new to development, right? They've quite often got in-house developers, sometimes hundreds of in-house developers. And in some circumstances, they've got a mini software house inside of their business. And what's really important to realize there is that they have a ton of governance already. So they'll have like a checklist. Sometimes you've got like 250, 300 developers sitting inside of a large multinational organization, that they've got sort of self-certification apps or apps to sort of like say, right, I need to do this thing on the cloud and I'm going to log all these things, and it'll be great, right? Perfect fit for developers, perfect fit like got everything in there for Azure, got everything in there for kind of disaster recovery, all that kind of good stuff. But then you take that same kind of questionnaire and you give that to a citizen developer or a Power Apps maker, even a Power Apps Pro developer. A lot of it becomes completely irrelevant, and there's a mismatch. There's a lack of joining there. And one thing that the big organization says, well, we need all of this data because these are apps, and we're treating every microscopic app for managing the T Club as the same as the app that was written with custom code in some nugget package with C# and all this kind of palaver over here. And they want to treat them the same, and they're fundamentally not the same. And it's how do you understand that scalability? How do you kind of talk to them about that? And it's a really difficult thing, and it's different for every organization, and you've got to kind of tease it out. And it's but they're the difficult bits. You're setting up the team and understanding, like, how the COE is going to function from a management perspective, and understanding how the platform is going to sort of sit inside of a big organization, or even a small medium-sized organization, and play nicely with everything else, and not upset the apple cart with all the other governance that's going on, because there is a load of other governance going on over here.
Because I didn't like when I was, sorry, Andrew, when I was fairly new to all of this, which wasn't that long ago, like I thought that the Centre of Excellence stuff was like, like Sancho's just done with the themes. I thought it was a way of like applying themes and stuff to apps, which seemed really sensible, like eminently sensible, and I couldn't believe that didn't exist. And then I was talking to Sancho about it the other day and saying, like, how many thousands of developers are there working on Power Platform all over the world? And like, he was the only one that came, well, he might not be the only one, but he's the only one I know of that came up with this. And that's what I thought the Centre of Excellence stuff was. So it wasn't until I got like further into it and I understood a little bit more about it that's not it at all, right? So sorry, Andrew, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that I've been dropping links into the chat as we've gone. One of the benefits of we're now in the third year of Power Platform Adoption Framework. So having worked on it long enough that we now at this point have a link for a lot of things. But the one I dropped most recently is that enterprise management track, and the first thing that it shows is this table, this diagram, and it basically has 5 pillars: platform management, enterprise architecture, ALM, mature security model, and user empowerment. And underneath those 5 pillars, there are 22 dimensions. And what that does, that's kind of the heart of what the adoption framework is it kind of provides a kind of base understanding of all the things that need to be done, right? So yes, the templates that come in the starter kit to kind of ensure consistent look and feel, that's part of it. But that list of 22 things, that kind of is the all-encompassing framework, so to speak, of what needs to happen from an enterprise management perspective. And to something that Keith said a moment ago, the most important, at least to me, dimension is actually environments. It's not COE starter kit, it's environments. So one of the things that a lot of organizations are struggling, particularly large organizations are struggling with right now, is the fact that they have a Dynamics footprint and they have a citizen developer footprint, and they haven't really figured out a way to bring those things together. So look at that environmental architecture model, and basically what we're saying in that model is we're saying that every workload, every solution, and every environment is either productivity important or critical. Everything is going to go into one of those categories. So IT organizations need to focus their effort on the critical and the important environments, whilst also setting up the productivity environments, locking them down to a level where they're basically comfortable with citizen developers doing whatever they please in those environments. If you screw it up, you screw it up, better luck next time. But IT is not going to devote a lot of resources to those productivity environments. And what you'll find is that you'll have 90% of the apps live in productivity, but 90% of the value lives in critical. It kind of, inverts itself. But that's to me what governance really is. It's about creating a framework, like the scaffolding for the building, and then layering everything on top of that. Like that model can drive your DLP policies. It can drive your investment choices. It can drive your data ecosystem, your master data management, et cetera, et cetera. It all gets driven off of that thing.
Okay, and like how did you get there? Like, what was it that drove? Because I think, Lee, this might be a question for you as well. What started this? How did you get to this model? What was the catalyst for you to go like, something like this needs to happen?
Yeah, so like I think me and Keith ended up starting a few drinks. Yeah, that'll be it.
Actually, I got hit in the head. I got hit in the head with a bathroom door, and then Lee and I drew this on a whiteboard. That's how it happened.
Yeah, that's how that.
Was it that night? Was it that?
It was
night?
that. Lee and I came up with this that night.
Yeah,
that was our Christmas Power Platform happy hour.
That was the night I left my backpack on the tube.
But before that point, it was in Amsterdam. So Keith and I were talking about having some of these issues, and then Keith introduced me to Manuela, who was having these issues at Virgin Atlantic as well, and Keith was having them at Ariba. We started then kind of hashing some stuff out about how we actually control the Power Platform. Then kind of Andrew and Lucy got involved when we were having a chat in Amsterdam, and then it kind of scaled from there, to be honest. And we got to this point where we actually kind of got to the point where pretending we understand what we're doing with it now.
What are things that what are things that would happen if you don't have it? Like, if you're someone like me and you've gone wading gaily into this without putting a centre of excellence together and without doing any of this adoption stuff, what do you expect to happen further down the line that tells people you need this, right? Because like at the moment, it's just me messing about on my system, so nobody really cares what happens apart from me. So, but what are the things that you would typically see happen that are real, what are the things that people should recognize and say, right, we should have done this, or we need to do this now?
Well, it depends on if you're going to get audited, doesn't it? Right. So the COE toolkit and the COE team are there to, like, even at the smallest, most micro level, the COE toolkit and the COE team, the COE toolkit extended, that is there to kind of safeguard you, to say, if someone comes in knocking on your door, if you get the GDPR police coming round, have you done an assessment on X, right? Like, this app is touching data, it's doing this, that, and the other. Have you put a tick next to the box to say, we have assessed this app, and the last time we assessed this app, we found this, right? It really is, in certain circumstances, for smaller businesses, as simple as that. And that's that. And oddly enough, when you get into arguments with the big ones, quite often what they really want to see is someone who they can go and talk to. So that ownership thing that Andrew's talking about, like, who am I going to go and talk to about this thing when it goes wrong, right? Whose responsibility is this? Where does the buck land? And on the back of that, of all of the checklists for information security, for the InfoSec team, for the legal team, for the compliance team, for the personal information team if they've got one, for the whatever, have they got all of their tick boxes filled in for each workload at whatever level? Like, some workloads at higher levels might have more tick boxes, some workloads at lower levels might have less. It depends on what you want to do, it depends on the organization. But it's basically kind of like, it really is like Power Platform, using Power Platform to solve the problems that Power Platform kind of spits out. But it doesn't solve the fact that someone needs to own it and a group of people need to take responsibility and ownership for it. And as Andrew said, it's absolutely the most kind of difficult bit to get people to agree on, is who the hell owns this damn thing.
I'm gonna. I don't know if I'm going to disagree with Keith a little bit, but I'll certainly modify what I would say is that it doesn't matter how large you are. Sit down with that framework for enterprise management. Sit down with the Power Platform Adoption Framework. Open to the enterprise management section. Maybe we should have called it just management, so we don't scare off the smaller organizations. You should at least, it doesn't matter how big you are, you should at least go through all 22 of those things and make a conscious choice to say, yes, I need to do something here, and this is what I'm going to do. or no, this doesn't apply to me, and this is why it doesn't apply to me. Because a lot of times you'll hear someone say, oh, no, that doesn't apply to me. I don't have a data ecosystem. And you're like, okay, where do you keep your sales data? Is it in Power Platform today? Well, no. Well, then that means you have a data ecosystem, right? Because if you have data in more than one place, you have a data ecosystem, and you at least should consciously make the choice to set that aside and kind of defend to yourself why you're setting that aside. And you could do that for any number of those dimensions. Force yourself, even if you were at a company of 5 people, force yourself to say, no, we don't need to do this, and this is why. Don't wait until shit hits the fan. Because when shit hits the fan, it's really expensive to clean. You'd be surprised how expensive it is to clean shit off of fans.
I would not be surprised at all. I've done it in many different scenarios, some not related to Power Platform and some related to actual shit. So I know that it's not a fun scenario. Lucy said the same thing. It shouldn't get to a shit hits the fab situation before before having this conversation. To speak to the point you mentioned about when people say I don't have a data ecosystem, and as Chris said, everybody has a data ecosystem. But do you think the point is that they don't understand what a data ecosystem is, right? They don't understand what it is that you're referring to. And I think that the first stage of any of this stuff is for people to actually understand what it is they're dealing with. A lot of this technology is very new to a lot of people who are starting to get involved in it, right? So, is there like an easy way in? Lee's got his hand up, which is nice. Go on, Lee.
No, Chris has as well. Go for it, Chris.
I just want to ask something. I don't know if I'm gonna. Okay, let's just put it this way. I think that a lot of people don't know they have a data ecosystem. I think the question I want to ask is, how many people do you run across that don't respect their data ecosystem?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
Literally.
There we go. I'm done.
That's all he's got. That was surprisingly not as belligerent as what I was expecting.
Oh no, it's coming, dude. It's yeah.
Because
see the fade in his head.
anytime he starts with, so I'm just gonna ask a question, you're like, no, he's about to pick a fight with you.
Yeah. No, it's coming. It's coming.
All right.
It's gonna happen for sure.
But this is great. This is great.
Flipping some of these questions around a bit. We've talked a lot about how to kind of restrict this down and how to pull this down. Want to kind of flip it the other way. So companies see value by getting improvements, right? How do we balance the difference between user empowerment, whether that's professional developers, whether it's citizen developers, don't care who it is, doesn't matter, business value, versus governance? Because at the end of the day, we find governance interesting, some of us, but that's quite geeky. Most businesses and most people don't, right? So how do we show business value alongside like potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of governance and adoption and stuff? Because obviously that's what is going to get us renewed on contracts, but also companies seeing value and to invest more in the platform.
Yeah. So one thing, and I have a link for this, so stand by. I'll get you a link for this. But I think that as a general principle, too many organizations, Keith and I worked with one a while back, and all they cared about were documents. They just cared about making rules and writing it down in Word documents. And that's what they thought governance was. Governance, when done well, should be almost entirely transparent to the citizen developer and to the end user. Governance is not about creating restrictions. It is about creating safe environments, not with a lowercase e, not like, but in actual kind of literal Power Platform environments. It's about creating environments, both technically and organizationally speaking, where development at all different kind of grades of the spectrum, right, from productivity up to critical, where governance empowers development rather than restrict development. So I think that's a really important general principle. in terms of getting value alongside it, the adoption framework has 3 tracks in it. One is enterprise management, which we beat to death in this conversation. Another is build, which is actual building solutions, which everyone knows. Maybe kind of the forgotten third track is road mapping, right? That's this idea that if an organization goes out and buys 40,000 per user licenses, they've actually really done themselves a favor. The first app that they deploy, the first enterprise app that they deploy, is going to be horrendously expensive. But the other solutions that they deploy after that are going to be essentially free, right? You've basically prepaid. There's no marginal consumption costs until you start to hit capacity limits or whatever. So the best way to really get to value here is to put energy into that roadmap, to go out into the business, to work with business users to identify what candidate workloads they have to migrate onto the platform or to build onto the platform, and then to prioritize those. I wrote a blog about this last week, and it's also now in the adoption framework. I will drop links into the chat for everyone on how to do this road mapping business.
Links like
like
a pro.
It's true.
Was that
it's
the end
also
of your...
important as well that if you're doing like when you are setting out and let's say you have no apps, say you have next to nothing, those initial workloads that you're kind of thinking about bringing to the platform that Andrew's just talking about there and building out that roadmap, they're really super useful to get some of those done and to go and extend the tendrils into the wider business and let them know it's coming, kind of engaging with those. A lot of them business have like an IT business partner, someone who someone who understands parts of the business and understands IT at the same time. And they can go and bring you some really good workloads to get you started. But one of the other things that they can do is bring you test cases to put through the center of excellence, right? So like we're talking about that whole, how does an app that Gene in Accounting builds, right, for, I don't know, whatever it is that Gene in Accounting builds, that goes on to be used organization-wide, right? Let's say Gene is the most successful citizen developer in the history of citizen developers, and their very first app goes on to be used by 40,000 people inside of an organization that requires premium licensing and has everything switched on and connects to multiple data sources, right? Gene builds it, she's whatever. Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you go from there to there? And having those use cases and those kind of those this is what the business will want eventually can really help you feed stuff through the sausage machine and see whether your governance that you're proposing is going to work.
Cool. Chris?
Yeah. So, Keith, that's a good response. I think where I'm going to go with this one is that what about, so we talk about the center of excellence like a centralized place of awesomeness, right? I mean, that's probably the only way I can articulate it. But what about the concept of decentralized centers of excellence? So you spoke about people being awesome citizen developers, but what happens when you get into an organization that is so big and they probably don't know that they have this stuff or have centers of excellence or have their own, little branch off IT departments and, Karen from accounts managing a bunch of apps that have come in. Like, is there a model for that, like a decentralized center of excellence approach?
I think there is. I mean, I'd be interested to see where Andrew's current thinking of this is, and he's written a blog post on it this week. Because 9 times out of 10, whenever we have a thought, Andrew's written something on it. But yeah, I think there is always something right at the very center. Be it in a massive organizations, there is almost invariably a group. I've very rarely come across one where there isn't a group. And I would say that is where the all-up single pane of glass for Power Platform sits. But it doesn't have to be a massive center of excellence for that central group function. If the businesses, the devolved businesses and the satellite companies have a huge amount of power and sway and they can do their own licenses and all that kind of stuff, you just want to have some way of kind of understanding from a whole what the usage is across the tenant to do any recharging and all that kind of stuff, to satisfy any security concerns and all that kind of thing that you want to have. But I think for the devolved businesses, the center of excellence becomes far more
Yeah, I think this is very much driven by organizational culture, and also how, in a lot of ways, legally the business is set up. So sometimes you have very strong central IT organizations that are even global in their nature. Sometimes you have very decentralized central IT organizations where basically you've got, Keith and I work with one organization in London where, basically they have a weak central IT organization, and they then kind of push out a huge level of autonomy to their regionalized business groups, Americas, EMEA, Asia Pacific, whatever. And so basically, I think that your center of excellence is going to fall organizationally, is going to fall into one of three categories. Either it is the driver, like the center of excellence is running the show. It is both providing for the care and feeding of the platform, and it is also responsible for developing applications, or for overseeing the development of applications and solutions that really create business value. So that's the COE is the driver. Then there is COE as the kind of the enabler, or the ninja cell, as I described earlier, where they're providing for the care and feeding of the platform, and they're dropping expertise into autonomous development teams when needed that may be regionalized or functionalized or whatever, but they're providing that very kind of active collaboration. But at the end of the day, the COE's job is to keep the platform running, not to bring workloads onto the platform. And then the third model, the third model is the very, very decentralized. Like, we are here to meet a minimum level of service. We will create an environment for you, give you the keys, and then what you do with that environment is no one's problem but your own. Here are the rules to follow. Good luck. So it really, that's a thing that's going to be driven by your organizational culture and your legal structure more than any sort of IT decision, to be honest.
You're on the money, and I think so. So something that I've found pretty interesting is that there are two types, right? There's Microsoft to have a COE starter kit, like Keith mentioned, and you mentioned in the beginning. Or then it's like, well, sell me the COE, and it's like, well, no, because that's not what you're buying. It's way more than that. It's much like bigger process. I mean, it's people, process, and tech, right? And I think a lot of the time it gets misframed. But I think the question off the back of that is, when you guys talk to people, not just customers, like people like us, you've not really once mentioned tech. And I mean, you've said apps a couple of times, and you've said workloads a couple of times, but like in my brain, I'm processing this massive thing that has all these cogs and doing all these amazing things. Is there any way to like sort of package it in an easier way for us to understand? Like, say, I don't know, maybe I'm rambling, but I'm trying to figure out, like, how is it easier for somebody to understand this in a bite-sized form? Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me, because that would be a question I would ask. Because I look at this and it seems like a really overwhelming task when you look at it in its entirety, right? A bit like putting in GDPR, which was the analogy you made earlier.
Yeah, I feel like there are lots of bricks here, and in my brain, I get what it is, but I'm trying to like snap them together, and it makes sense because you've spoken about the people, you've spoken about the tech, and you've spoken about the process from an adoption perspective. But I'm just thinking, like, how does this not sound cohesive?
So you want biceps, and you asked Andrew Welch and Keith Whatling to give you to answer.
Yeah, I mean,
I
was gonna say, Chris, it's called AIS marketing material. I can send you some.
Yeah. No, the reason I'm asking it is because, I mean, you guys brought up the smaller customers, earlier in the chat. And one of the things I had with Microsoft partners while I was at Microsoft was, honestly, they didn't care about the center of excellence. That was lost on their bill. They wanted to sell an app. And Microsoft obviously, do funding around certain customers and partners that can sell an app. And everyone's like, oh, it's an app. Cool. It's going to solve a problem. But ultimately, it doesn't really do that. I mean, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, a few controversial opinions. One, if I never hear the phrase app in a day again, I will not be sad. App in a day
Freaking
is dumb. I get the purpose of it, but actually one of the things that I think Microsoft sellers are particularly guilty of this, right? Is like saying, yeah, we're going to come in and do app in a day, and it's like, you did that app in a day at the absolute wrong time in the life cycle of this adoption. You taught all of these people to build an app in a day, and then you sent them back to their offices where they have no environment to build it in, no licenses to build it with, exactly. No sort of support or anything to do anything with it, and they might not even have the ability. They might be totally locked out of it. So, yeah. So I mean that controversial. Well, apparently not controversial in this crowd. Opinion number one: app in a day is dumb. If I never hear about it anymore, I won't be sad. What was your question? I got so worked up about app in a day, Chris.
Dude, it's just
this is the content we came for,
yeah.
Andrew.
Ultimately, Andrew, where I'm going with this is, why do people not get the concept of a strategic platform and it's instant gratification? I know the answer is instant gratification. I want an app now. I'm a petulant child, but it's more like, no, it's bigger.
I mean, I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that in order to, and Charles and Ryan, forgive me, but in order to say in the Gartner rankings, Microsoft has to run its mouth nonstop about citizen developers, and this incessant, ongoing talking about citizen developers has convinced a lot of big organizations that it's easy and any idiot can do it, which is wrong. But it also has convinced, I think, a lot of organizations that this stuff doesn't sit in the strategic space, right? That Power Platform is for making toys. Yep. And you're not going to sell it. It's almost counterproductive, right? You're not going to sell per app or per user licenses so that everyone in your company can make toys. You're going to sell per user licenses because you're really, really moving the needle from a value perspective for these organizations. So the most important thing, forget the COE starter kit, it's important. Forget enterprise management, it's important. Forget all that. If you're not going to glue it all together into a way that kind of supports strategic business objectives, then forget it. I mean, that Power Platform is terrible. Is a terrible option for one app. It is not cost effective for one app. That's why we talk about workloads. Power Platform becomes cost effective on app number 10, 50, 100, 1,000. That's where it is. That's where the value is.
You're on the money.
I wanna. Sorry.
That's also very kind of like, when you look at the easy, there's something that Emily Cart says, and it's that low code doesn't mean low complexity and low quality, right? And that is something that you should tattoo on yourself when you talk to people about Power Platform, right? And it also, just because it is easier does not make it easy, right? Doesn't make it less prone to error. Okay. As soon as you write an if statement, you are telling a computer to do something that you have decided. So if there is some kind of like, if you think about a modern car with the accelerator and the brake aren't connected to anything, only some sort of resistor device or some sort of electronics that then decide to brake the car for you or not. We as developers are kind of, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that the logic works. So that doesn't mean that you can't test it. It doesn't mean that you can't do X. It doesn't mean that you can't do Y. It doesn't mean that you don't write any documentation. And this is all part of the kind of that wider governance piece that we've been talking about tonight. It's like, just because this, and Andrew's absolutely right. Look, app in a day, fantastic marketing tool. Samir Bangar like just literally tripped over this thing, called it app in a day, and now Microsoft wants to do an in a day for everything. And okay, all right, it's great. It's a great marketing to get you on a training course, but it's a training course. The platform, it ain't. Yeah. It's not like, it sets the wrong opinion for sure. Absolutely the wrong sort of cadence for sure with the whole damn thing. To some of us on this call all tried to have another go at writing it, and that was pretty damn tough. So any kind of universal power platform training, it's quite difficult to put together. So
I think, I think it depends on where you are and what your level of knowledge is as to how valuable the app in a day stuff is, because from my perspective, I can see that there is some value in some of the content in app in a day. But I would also like to chuck in something controversial. If there's anybody on the call that has struggled with using adoption practices or putting in Centre of Excellence, would they what did they struggle with? Or have you guys got any stories of typical problems that people get?
Kit, at any point in time, upgrading the COE starter kit is not easy.
Yeah.
I know it's potentially, what we're saying is only a small part of it, but if we're talking about really making this accessible to organizations, that should be way easier to upgrade with the new releases than it can be at times.
Well, and one of the things you hear, the folks at Microsoft, like Julie Strauss, talk about is kind of this decision where Microsoft, that team at Microsoft is always looking at, okay, what are we going to put into the COE starter kit? Because the advantage of putting into the COE starter kit is that you can get it out to the market quickly, and you can allow partners and customers to customize it and build on top of it. The disadvantage is that the more you put in there, the more of a nightmare it becomes to upgrade and maintain. So the alternative is that you can stick it into the Power Platform Admin Center, which, by the way, Microsoft people hate when you call it the PPAC. I'm trying to break myself of that habit. You stick it into the Admin Center, right? And the advantage to that is that makes it much easier to support from a Microsoft perspective. It makes it much more plug and play. You don't have to upgrade it. You don't have to really think about it. You just go use the capability. But the disadvantage is that partners and customers, they kind of have what they have, Yeah, Bibby, I'm with you. I really want to call it PPAC, but Julie yelled at me.
Well, perhaps we should yell at Julie and tell her that we want PPAC, and that's how it is. So nobody wants to volunteer an experience of someone struggling to put in any element of the Centre of Excellence. So totally got away with that. Any closing thoughts as we go into the slides telling us what wonderful virtual events we can be jaded about in the coming months? No closing thoughts. Nobody cares.
Well then, are you serious? Alison, did I show you my mug?
Do you know what? I really thought you were going to say something else then. No, you didn't.
I know.
You didn't show me your mug. No.
I got this delightful mug. Don't forget.
Don't forget the D.
The D.
Do you know what? You'll always be known as the D man, and I will never go to anybody else to announce my dates for me. So
thank you.
It's good to have a niche, I think. So unless anybody wants to bring up any more questions, then all that remains is for us on the Power Platform Virtual Happy Hour team to say a massive thank you to Andrew. Don't forget the D Welch and Keith Whatling. Round of applause. Thank you very much, guys. That went very quickly. less shouting, I think, than the Mark Smith, Steve Mordew one. So perhaps step your game up next week.
Sorry, I'm still thinking
That's
about
because you didn't ask us any questions about configuration management.
Well, had I been prompted beforehand, I absolutely would have done if I'd known that was
no.
All you've got to say is just ask Andrew about a Canvas app that you built on Excel and why it's not working. Just ask him about that, and
Andrew, yes,
the rage monster will still start coming very quickly.
That's your own fault for using Excel. I have
no, I did. Chris, you know that I didn't build a Canvas app on Excel. Like, you had me at Canvas app. You know I didn't build a Canvas app. Like, just all stop. Like,
I will say in your defense, Andrew, right? You always say you build horrific looking Canvas apps, but by God, you build the most beautiful model driven app I've ever seen.
Oh,
so I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah,
there's an order and organisation that only an Andrew Welch can bring to a model driven app.
Nice. So if you want to reach out to these guys about anything to do with adoption framework or Centre of Excellence or licensing questions, then feel free.
Apart from licensing questions, Chris Huntingford is your man.
Jamie Willis-Ray's also dropped a link in for, what is it? It's just scrolled up now. Thanks, Jamie. You have to drop C if you're not sick of Keith. The Washington DC Power Platform UG on selling the Power Platform. Oh, that sounds very interesting. Next Wednesday.
For licensing questions, if no one has this link, you can go to the link below for all of your licensing questions.
Oh, Andrew, you are a wag.
It will take you directly to Chris Huntingford's Twitter profile.
We should really promote that more, because people need that information. So yes. Tomorrow it's the Birmingham UG. I think Andy Bibby's on the call.
It's the data platform UG, not.
Oh, sorry.
Holy shit, that's news to me.
I was going to say, you kept that quiet. Well done. Sorry, apologies. Data platform UG in Birmingham tomorrow. Who runs that?
No idea.
Okay, good. 14th of April is the DC Power Platform meeting on how to sell the Power Platform. That sounds super interesting. I will be very keen to join that. 20th of April, the virtual power group doing better customer service. If you haven't joined any of the VPG sessions, they are super helpful and informative, and I would urge you to do so.
That's EY as well.
Is EY on it this time, is it? Nice. And the 21st of April, the Norwegian Microsoft 365 meetup, which should be pretty interesting. Then the UK UG on the 22nd of April, presumably, Andy, that is you.
Indeed, yeah.
I think Joel Abbott's on that one as well, isn't he?
Indeed, yeah. He's doing a session about recruitment, and they're not actually all that bad.
Well, I don't know who he's talking about. I have no idea. 22nd of April, Dynamics Meetup Deutschland, Power Platform UG in Ireland on a meetup on the 29th of April. 4th of May is the Microsoft Cloud South Coast UG, which I think they just had theirs last night as well, didn't they? But I missed it. Yeah. So I don't know if anybody here was on it and it was good, but I missed it, unfortunately. Microsoft Business Applications Summit on the 4th of May. Anybody got any info on that? No link?
I'm still having flashbacks from the first one I went to. My God.
Was that Amsterdam? That was Amsterdam.
I'm surprised that you have the ability to have flashbacks from it.
Nice. Is it like PTSD or something?
It was scooters. Yeah.
Then the next Power Platform virtual happy hour on the 5th of May, which I'm sure you're all waiting for with bated breath. Joe's always also posted in the chat. He's put some subjects up for table talk submissions, which look pretty interesting. So if you want to get involved in those. Larry has also posted up a link for MBAS. Thank you very much, Larry. And that all that remains is for me to say thank you so much for joining us, and thank you as always to my wonderful co-conspirators Lee, Chris, and Carlos on the controls. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.